Welcome to Gideon's Promise, the podcast. In the landmark 1963 decision Gideon v. Wainwright, the U.S. Supreme Court unanimously ruled every person accused of a crime in America must be provided a lawyer, regardless of their ability to pay. This podcast is about the people that uphold that promise, public defenders. These dedicated lawyers give voice to 80% of the people thrown into the system, and yet in the national discussion regarding justice reform, public defenders are largely overlooked. This show centers public defenders in that conversation. We will explore the critical role public defenders play in addressing a wide range of issues facing marginalized communities with subject matter experts, key opinion leaders, and people impacted by the American criminal legal system. Listen as a community of advocates discuss their work to strengthen public defenders and transform public defense. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back. It is January 2022 wrap.
It's 2022.
Happy
Finally.
New Year. Happy
Yes.
New Year. And woo, what a January it has been.
Already.
So welcome to Gideon's Promise, the podcast. I am so excited today to speak to our public defenders in the start of the new year, getting the new year off started right. Introduce two wonderful members of the Gideon's Promise community, Jamila Lee and Kat Lake, who has joined us today. Welcome, welcome.
Welcome.
January is National Mentorship Month, and we are so thrilled to have Jamila and Kat here today to discuss Gideon's Promises Mentorship Program. But let me introduce our special guest for today. So Kat Lake grew up in Savannah, Georgia. So she's a Georgia girl. Savannah, Georgia. She later attended the University of Georgia's Law School, which means, Kat, I think you were probably excited about the recent national win over the weekend. Yeah. We'll talk about that later. Kat has worked as a public defender in Atlanta Public Defender Fulton County office here in Georgia for over 5 years now. Jamila Lee attended Atlanta John Marshall's Law School. Woo! That school sounds familiar, right?
It does. I spent many hours in Atlanta.
Oh, that's because you teach there. Man, I forgot what your day job was. Okay, so Jamila Lee is a graduate of Atlanta John Marshall's Law School. And since she has since then returned to her home state of Texas to work as a public defender in the Dallas County Public Defender Office. Both attorneys have participated in Gideon's Promises Mentorship Program and will be able to give us some insight into why mentors are such a critical part of the process to becoming a stronger public defender. Welcome, ladies. Welcome to Gideon's Promise, the podcast.
Yes, no, absolutely. And mentorship really is a critical component of the Gideon's Promise model. For those in our audience that don't know, we recruit a new class of lawyers each year. They begin their experience at Gideon's Promise with a very intense 14 days of initial training where they're not just learning skills, they're not just learning the law, but they're really learning lawyering values, client-centered values, and how to practice consistently with them. And what we find is when lawyers leave that 2 weeks and go back to systems that can be hostile to those values, it can be easy to have those values beaten out of you. It can be easy to start to forget why you came to this work in the first place. And so the mentorship component of our program is really a way that we keep every lawyer connected to folks who have been doing the work, who have thought about how to tackle some of the difficult challenges, how to sort of address some of the pressures to abandon our values consistent with the client-centered values that we teach. And so really, we don't just see mentorship as a luxury. It really is a necessity that is absolutely essential to developing the lawyers that we think the folks we serve deserve.
So I want to turn my question over to Kat. And just for our listeners, it's Catherine Lake. I'm so used to calling her Kat. I want to make sure I use her government name in her introduction. But Catherine Kat, that we lovingly call her. Can you walk us through what the mentorship program looked like when you first began training with Gideon's Promise?
Sure. Raf and Illy, thank you for the warm welcome. Thank you for having me. So I started the Core 101 program in 2017. And at that time, the mentorship program from a mentee's perspective looked a little less formal. I was contacted by my assigned mentor and said, hey, this is who I am. This is my contact information. If you ever need anything, let me know. I was really encouraged when I became a mentor in 2020 that there was that it was a little more structured, that there was a program and a support system in place for mentors to continue training and to continue exploring, effective ways to connect with mentees. And yeah.
So, when you started in 2017, it's almost hard to remember the world before there was a pandemic, but it was pre-pandemic, and you began your experience with Gideon's Promise with a 2-week program. I believe we were in Oxford, Mississippi at the time. Is that right?
Yeah, we were in Oxford.
Yeah. And obviously the last 2 years have changed things. Jamila was scheduled to join us for that 2-week initial training in the summer of 2020, and we have not had a chance to gather live since. And so in this COVID world, doing this work without the foundation that 2 weeks provides, without the community that we try to provide, I think is even more difficult. And I wonder, Jamila, can you talk about the challenges of being a public defender during these really difficult times, these times of a pandemic, and what it's meant to you to have Kat, to have a mentor to help you through these times?
So first, thank you for letting me participate in this. I think that it has been really critical because the way that the format of allowing the Gideon's mentor to be able to, at least if I'm not in person and getting that core, I'm still getting what Gideon's means from my mentor in terms of the one-on-one and being able to have virtual meetings, and we meet once a month, and we that has been very helpful to at least have that. And maybe in a way, COVID has allowed different opportunities to use the virtual formats to get some of that face time that when, you may not be living in the same state, and it's going to be, I think the technology has been a benefit in a way.
And I wonder, Kat, if I can ask you, because now your entire mentorship experience has been during the pandemic. And have you had a sense of extra urgency as a mentor, or a heightened sense of responsibility as a mentor? Has it been challenging being a mentor during these difficult times? What's it been like?
So, Rap, I think the biggest challenge for me mentoring during COVID is, COVID is really, we've seen the, ubiquitous use of this kind of platform, Zoom and FaceTime and all that stuff. I think the biggest challenge I've had is gauging my mentees' comfort with using that as opposed to just a traditional phone call. My mentee became a lawyer, started practicing law during COVID, which is mind-boggling to me.
Yes.
And in a lot of ways, I think this is, the world that she was born into and has acclimated to. And in a lot of other ways, her jurisdiction has done a pretty good job of keeping people in person as much as possible. So yeah, I would say our biggest challenge is just trying to gauge what makes her comfortable, what makes her feel most connected and supported.
So can I ask, and this is a little bit off script, because I'm interested for people who our listeners are learning about public defenders over this last year and a half of this podcast. And everyone has their own experience or the idea of what mentorship or the definition of mentorship is. In your experience, Jamila, like what, without breaking confidence, of course, what kind of support did you receive or do you receive? Like what do you guys talk about? Like how lawyers don't need mentors, do they? Right? No, like public defenders don't even. Can you
No,
describe some of the support that you've been receiving?
right. So, I mean, as a public defender in a large jurisdiction in a large office, I mean, I have unique mentors here, but I think that the distinction of the Gideon's mentor, because of what Gideon's Promise's whole goals are with really changing the criminal justice system in terms of a public defender, having the Gideon's mentor gives me an opportunity to like have an hour every month with somebody that's not necessarily connected to my office, but also understands, the national need for what we're all trying to do, and can, sometimes remind me of like the challenges that I may be having in my office are the same challenges that are
Right.
happening in PD's offices across the country.
Right.
So
No.
that's been very valuable.
No, I appreciate that, because by design, we want to make sure that every member of the Core 101 program has a mentor who is not connected to their office. The thinking is that there are people in your office who have gone through the Gideon's Promise program who you have access to, but having a mentor who's not part of your office allows you to tap into different ideas, maybe a new perspective. I wonder if both of you, starting with you, Kat, can talk about whether you think that is in fact valuable to have a mentee, and when you were a mentee, to have a mentor who is not part of the office where you work.
Absolutely, Rap, 100%. My one of the challenges I think of being a public defender and continuing to be a public defender is the eventual realization that on some level, and perhaps to a greater degree in some offices than others, your office is a part of or in some way connected with the very same system that you are trying to disrupt and dismantle. And your office can at times be complicit in the injustice. It just takes out that complication of office politics when your mentor is not in the same office as you. You don't have to worry about what he or she or they are going to say to somebody else within the office, or what he or she or they are going to think about what you're saying.
Jamila's nodding her head. Do you agree with that, Jamila?
She said it perfectly.
So, Kat, you've been doing this work for a little over 5 years now, right? So you've been doing over 5 years. How has the GP mentorship program helped you through your career? So we give everyone a mentor their first year. We say use how, when you started, you said it was real informal. How has it helped you over the now 4 years later after you were assigned a mentor? How has it helped you?
So, Illy, I really struggle with, and I think a lot of us do, I really struggle with when I'm in that moment of adversity and pressure and stress and feelings of inadequacy and less than. I go to the isolation, right? Like okay. I don't reach out. I don't ask for help. And I think the biggest thing about the Gideon's mentorship program is it takes away that barrier of, well, who could I reach out to? Like if I wanted help, if somebody would be willing to help me, who would it be? It would be your Gideon's Promise mentor. It would be so many people in the Gideon's Promise community who are always there for you, and for whom I try to be there as well. it just, it removes that, barrier.
So I want to go back to, you mentioned something is so many other people, right? So everyone's assigned a mentor. So are there other people in the organization, other public defenders that aren't your quote unquote formal assigned mentor that you go to? And if so, who are they? And Jamila, the same question for you. Like, who are they, Kat? Just so our listeners can understand, it's not just a one-on-one relationship sometimes.
Sure. Well, I got to give a shout out to the Gideon's Promise heroes in our office, or formerly with our office, Devin Franklin, Zanelli Gubaini, Anna Curian. And then, of course, people that I've connected with over, my time in the Core 101 program, people who are part of my class that I still keep in touch with, including Wilhelmina Joseph. Who else? I've reached out to Dave Klaus a couple of times, Jenny Andrews. There are so many. Maddie, Madeline Welsh. Madeline Welsh and I did yoga online together a couple of times during the pandemic.
That's awesome. And in the last few people, outside of Madeline, she mentioned Jenny Andrews and Dave Klaus, who are faculty members. There are trainers who also sometimes serve as unofficial mentors for our classes. And Jamila, what about you? Have there been people, I know in your state, in your home state of Texas, you have Texas mentors that may or may not be a part of Gideon's Promise, but then there are also, anyone else that you've reached out to over this, especially with this very trying time?
Right. So with Texas, yes, I have a mentor that is not connected to my office, that is in private practice in Tarrant County, Fort Worth, and neighboring county. I also have an internal mentor that I because doing misdemeanor cases, I have a felony mentor. And so, I definitely have mentors outside of Gideon's Promise mentors. With the program that Gideon's partnered with Texas and that Future Indigent Defense Leaders of Texas, there's a whole network of folks that are participating in that I have access to as mentors as well. So,
yeah, no, I think for those of you in Texas, you do sort of take advantage of two mentors, because the fetal program gives you a mentor who really understands the practice in the jurisdiction where you're working, and Gideon's Promise gives you someone who can bring an outside perspective about how to deal with challenges outside of the box. It really is sort of a perfect blend, I think. I want to ask a question, and what I really want to know is sort of like, do you have like a special mentorship moment you could share without divulging confidences? But is that something you all could think of and answer?
I think if it's helpful, just stressing again that having that somebody outside of the organization to really be able to connect with in what the mission is, because I think that's been incredibly valuable for me.
Kat, is there anything you can think of?
I can. I can actually think of two. There was a moment where the sort of Gideon's Promise model of connecting with my client did not go well for me. The client took advantage of my vulnerability, perhaps, and he did something very inappropriate. And I called Elena Booth. And I said, Elena, I've done it all wrong. I've done it all wrong. I've done it wrong. Everything in my life I've done wrong. And she said, Kat, how many clients do you have right now? And I said, I don't know, about 150. Wow. And she said, how many of those clients have responded to your advocacy the way that this guy did? And I said, one. And it reminded me that I'm doing my best, and I'm not responsible for other people's actions. And the last one I'll mention, I'll just make it brief. you know that Sean Hoover and Carmen Brooks live in Atlanta now.
Yeah.
I had dinner with them recently, and I wanted to meet with them because I was feeling so low once again about a mistake that I had made, where I agreed in like a pretrial discussion with the prosecutor to an outcome for a client that was not the best outcome I could have gotten. And I was irritated because I had the upper hand in that negotiation, and I let him get the best of me. And I was so upset about it. And Sean Hoover looked at me and he said, Kat, we've all been there. We've all made that mistake. I bet you won't make it again. And it is because what makes you a great public defender is that you're being so hard on yourself about it. Is that you care so much about having done it. So those are the two I can think of.
Yeah, that's great.
So I want to shift to everyone across the nation's favorite topic over the last almost 2 years. COVID-19. COVID-19, right? I hope to one day never have to say that name, word, phrase ever again. But I want to shift to it because it is our current reality. We are still in the middle of a pandemic. We know that COVID is running rampant in the jails and prisons. The very people, the folks that we service, public defenders, are serving on a daily basis. And people's lives and livelihoods are at stake every single day. And it's a stressful time for people who are not in the criminal justice arena. And for public defenders, I think it is just as stressful as many other service-driven professions. And my question for both of you is, how has COVID-19 affected mentorship? And by that, I'm asking the health and wellness of the defense community is extremely important to Gideon's Promise and the staff and everyone. How has the mentorship program or your mentorship relationships been affected by COVID in this pandemic?
Again, I think that having that monthly, because the structure, I've really enjoyed the structure of the Gideon's platforms to be able to connect electronically through messages, but then to have that, knowing that I'm going to have that scheduled one-on-one, face-to-face, even if it's virtual, each month, and to really, for my mentor to spend the time with me to kind of check in and of what's going on. And we talk about those realities of COVID and the struggle of how to move a docket in a pandemic. But then also giving me encouragement and reminding me, like, what are you doing to take care of yourself?
Yeah.
So that's it's been incredibly rewarding and beneficial. And it's to definitely help. I know it's helped me to keep the focus, basically.
Kat, what about you? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that as a mentor, it's been so valuable for me in these past 2 years as this has dragged on, and as the unique injustices that COVID has brought about are now becoming normalized.
Yeah.
To be reminded by somebody who is newer to this than I am that it's not normal. Hey, this isn't fair. I think when we work and when we do this long enough, I think to some extent we have to kind of deal with that, what do they call it, moral injury, by normalizing it, and to have that reminder from my mentee, like, this is effed up. It reminds me that, yeah, it really is, and that's why we're here.
So you mentioned moral injury, and one thing that I think we have really been fortunate to have during this pandemic are some amazing public defenders. We mentioned Jenny Andrews and Dave Klaus earlier, have really thought about how to work with our community on wellness and taking care of themselves and sustaining themselves for this fight. But one thing I often say is that actually, it is easy to do this work if you sleepwalk through it, if you learn to not care, if you become numb. You won't be a good public defender, but you won't be up at night worrying. What is hard is being a caring lawyer. And I think what we strive to do at Gideon's Promise is to develop a generation, a community of caring lawyers. But we recognize that when you care, you're going to have those experiences, Kat, that you mentioned, brought you to Elena Booth, brought you to Sean and Carmen, right? The mentorship piece is critical in sustaining caring lawyers, because it's caring lawyers that feel the pain of being so close to injustice every day. And the mentorship piece is such a critical part of that.
Yeah, and part of that, I had a question for both of you about the safe space. So Jamila, you talked a lot about, I know once a month, I'm going to get on Zoom, right, or whatever video conference platform to talk with my mentor. When we started this program, it has always been and will continue to be meant to be an in-person, face-to-face initial meeting, right? The initial meeting, we try to make sure all of our defenders get to meet their mentors live and develop that trust factor before everyone goes off across the country and then has to meet, video or phone or however they choose to communicate, email. How has that trust factor or safety been built in this virtual space when you haven't had the opportunity yet to ever meet your person in person, one-on-one?
Right. No, I hear what you're saying. I think I think it goes kind of back to what Kat was mentioning too, in terms of these new realities of everything being Zoom and or whether it's me talking to my clients virtually or whatever. There's kind of been a normalcy that, for better or worse, in that this format. And I think if we hadn't had COVID, I wouldn't have had to do it virtually. But because we did, and because other elements of using all this virtual format have become so normal, I think it just worked that
Gotcha.
with the Gideon's Mentor, it's like, no, this is a safe place. Just because I'm not there in person with you, just like I have to make a safe place for my clients when I'm doing this virtually. It's just kind of gone hand in hand.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I'm gonna actually go off script a little because there's something I want to ask you, Kat. And now that I've got you on a podcast, I want to ask you this. It's not necessarily
in front of all the public in all the world.
It's in front of everyone. It's not necessarily about mentorship, although it may be. Kat, one thing I really remember well was when we met in Mississippi.
Oh, you gonna tell that story, Ram?
No. Kat was one of the people that was more reluctant to buy into the way we train at Gideon's Promise. And
Kat was on my list.
the first couple of days, Kat was like, I don't need to connect with anyone.
Nope.
That's not what I'm trying to do.
Nope.
And then fast forward, right? I remember a time in Atlanta, we had a gathering at the office and it was like over and everyone left and a handful of us were going to dinner and there's Kat sitting with us at dinner and she's hanging out and she's like, I don't want to leave the Gideon's Promise. What happened, Kat? What happened between that day one and like now when you're fiending for Gideon's Promise community?
And just to let you know, our listeners can't see her, but she's laughing hysterically right now because, John and I, we don't lie. This is truth is the thing. It really did happen. But yeah, I'm interested in that. What happened, Kat?
It's so true. And I remember that dinner. That was 6 months after the that first 2 weeks in Oxford, Mississippi. So here's what happened is, I had been a public defender for a year-ish. I had been practicing law for 3 or 4. And my boss comes to me and says, hey, I want you to go to this training program. I said, cool. I could use some training. That sounds great. And then I get there and Rap's like throwing around phrases like, I love you people. And I'm like, what is going on here? Like, what is this? This is so unprofessional. And then I mean, it was amazing, really. I started to discover my sense of purpose in my work, in my life. The sense that I do have power to affect our community. I can empower the people that I work with, my clients. And it was a really valuable thing for me, I think personally and professionally, to have this sort of powder keg, this very like intense, environment where somebody's beating on your head saying, share something really vulnerable about yourself. And I kind of went like, all right, well, screw you. I'm going to do it. And I did. And I thought for sure everyone loved me before then because I present well and they liked what I presented. And then I found out that my class, my Gideon's class, still loved me, not in spite of what I shared, but because of it. And I kind of thought to myself, well, then maybe I should try to love myself too. And I'm a better person for it. I'm a better advocate for it. That's what happened.
Thanks,
Wow.
Kat, for sharing.
Yeah.
And I think when we were really at the height, I ran into her at the courthouse one day, and it was just, we were so excited to see each other. But
And Jamila's like, okay, I'm supposed to show up in 1 week in Atlanta. I'm not coming now.
Jamila, you gotta come.
I'm coming. I'll
The
be
love,
there.
the love is here, and Kat's right. Rap does love everyone just for simply being present, and it's so true. If you can do this work, I applaud anyone who can do this work, and so public defenders are near and dear to both of our hearts.
So you're coming, Jamila.
Pending that COVID negative test.
All right.
So the last question that we have for both of you is, we talked about Gideon's Promise mentors, and not everyone has the luxury or opportunity to be a part of Gideon's Promise programming for whatever reason, mostly resources and our very stretched resources. So what advice would you have for public defenders who are struggling right now and may not be able to get to Gideon's Promise? What advice would you have for public defenders struggling right now and are looking for a mentor? And Jamila, I will start with you.
I think that whether you've been a public defender for 5 months or 5 years, there's always something that you may know more than somebody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes, it's just reaching out to somebody that you see maybe more experienced. I think people want to give their knowledge to others and help people do this work, and just ask somebody, or if you're got a little bit more experience, then maybe volunteer to be somebody else's mentor too. Because like I'm still a baby attorney, but I'm seeing folks come in to my office that are baby attorneys. So, so it's like, you still, I think you get something out of that by trying to help somebody else. And then just, whether it's your local criminal defense bar, or, we have like a listserv here in Dallas, and there's, folks that you're like, okay, yeah, they've been practicing a while, just, I think somebody who's been doing this for a while, and you see that they have this kind of same mindset as you, would be flattered to just ask. So.
Kat?
Yeah, I think I would say that, when I'm stressed and upset and being hard on myself, I tend to think that I'm alone in that I am uniquely flawed, right? I am the most terrible person in the world. And I think it's so important when you're in that place to remember that everyone goes through it.
Yeah.
Everyone goes through it. Everyone can relate to that. You are not alone. And also, if you can put yourself in the shoes of the person that you are thinking about reaching out to, and think about times when other people have reached out to you. Like, what a gift is that? What a gift is it for somebody to come to you and say, I'm struggling. I'm having a hard time. Can you please help me? It's such a gift for the person who's being approached. I know it's scary. It's scary to approach, and do it anyway, because you're not alone and they will appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. You know, as a public defender, and especially as a public defender in some of the more challenging places where many of our lawyers work, it is really difficult to walk into courtrooms every day where judges oftentimes want you to just sit down and shut up and keep the conveyor belt moving, right? That gets really hard. And I often say to public defenders when they call and they express that challenge that, you know, if you can just stand up, if you can say, Judge, I'm not doing it today, I'm not participating, you may not get the result that your client deserves. But when you do that in Atlanta, Kat, and when you do that in Dallas, Jamila, and when we have lawyers doing it in Montgomery and New Orleans and Shreveport and Augusta and all across the South and increasingly the country, right? You are starting to raise expectations about what justice means for poor folks. And I think that really what we're about at Gideon's Promise is more than just training lawyers to be great lawyers for individuals, one case at a time, although that's a big piece of it. We are also about building a community that collectively is resisting a system of injustice. And quite frankly, the mentorship component is absolutely critical to our ability to build that community and to sustain lawyers when they just stand up and say, Judge, I'm not doing it today. And so thank you both. Thank you both for being a part of this podcast, for being a part of the mentorship program, for being a part of this broader effort. I just want to, before I turn it over to Illy, really say to both of you, thank you.
So Jamila Lee from the Dallas County Public Defender Office in Dallas, Texas, and Catherine Lake from the Atlanta Fulton County Public Defender Office in Atlanta, Georgia. I want to say thank you so much for being the guest on Gideon's Promise, the podcast. And in true former fashion, I am Ilham Askia.
And I am Jonathan Wrapping
Wrapping it up.
Hey, Il, before we hit that outro, why don't you tell people how to order a copy of the book in your radio voice?
In my radio voice?
Yeah, in your radio voice.
Okay. Get your copy of Gideon's Promise, a public defender movement to transform criminal justice at Amazon, IndieBound, Beacon Press, or wherever books are sold. Pre-order today, and a portion of proceeds will help us support public defenders.
Oh, that was good. That was good.
Thank you for listening to Gideon's Promise, the podcast. For more information on the topics covered and featured guests, please visit our website at gideonspromise.org. And finally, please subscribe, share, and let us know what you think.